I did a video recently on how to start a solo RPG session, and I talked in that video about the importance of establishing an environment, a place, a setting into which you put your characters, into which you put your story, and in fact, from which a story could develop, from which a narrative would be generated. In this video, I want to look at two really essential resources for GMs as well as solo GMs. This is the GM's Miscellany selection from Raging Swan Press. We're going to look at the wilderness dressing and we're going to look at the dungeon dressing. And by look at, I mean we're going to actually use them. They are a series of mostly, but not all, D100 tables, extensive in their development and reach, as well as a few essays on dungeon design in the case of this book. And you can see from the table of contents here that it is extensive. There are chapters on, or I should say, tables on things like entrances and names and ceilings and aspects of the architecture, floors, illumination, things like legends that could be developed, various features, mirrors, atmosphere. What I'm going to do in the video, and I'm actually going to start with the wilderness dressing, is to show how you can, as a soloist, take available material that is based not in a character, not even in a rule set, and generate a story and begin to generate ideas about where the characters that you're ultimately going to develop and where the rule set that you're ultimately going to use will take you in the context of your play. We're looking here at the table of contents of the wilderness one. We have a section on features and events, folk, that it would be like people populating the environment, by land, by sea. We're going to look at the land here. I've got a little land here to indicate that we'll be doing that first, and then move into the development of some kind of a dungeon setting. But as I said, really what I want to show and really what I want to demonstrate is the way in which you're not just using these resources to come up with a description. You're using the resources to come up with a narrative, to come up with story hooks that you can use to develop what you're going to do and that you can return to when you have noted them down in the course of your solo play when things may seem a little stuck, or when you think to yourself, I'm just going to roll on a table to try to get an answer here. Perhaps more than doing that, if you started out by developing your environment, if you started out by developing a history of the place and some preceding information that may not be part of your play, and I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment, you'll have something to go back to during the course of doing your solo work where you feel like you might get stuck. So with that introduction, let's turn to the wilderness dressing and just start to work with this book and see how rolling on random tables can take you from something completely disconnected to the formulation of a story and some place to begin your session. Now, I'm a fairly inconsistent journal writer in terms of solo RPG work, but this is a place where I think keeping some kind of notes can be useful, and also using different colored ink to note down different kinds of details that you may roll up and encounter, because you then, if you're referring back to this material during the course of play, especially if you're somebody that's going to be playing sessions over periods of days, weeks, months, or even years, returning to things, it can be useful if you, as the themes start to develop, they are sort of color-coded in some way, or maybe underlined, so you could return to them. But as I said, I'm a pretty inconsistent note taker, so probably not the best person to be giving that advice. we're going to do something by land here, and I think I want to go to Borderlands right away. I'm going to go to minor events in Borderlands because I like to start, if I can, with something that already seems marginalized, that already contains perhaps a contradiction. The very idea of a borderland, of a place between two things. When I see something like that in a table of contents, I'm going to start there because that is going to tell me that there's already some idea of transition. There's already something built into the environment that I could create a story from. Why is there a border here? What's on the other side? How did it get there? Who divided this up? Is it a place that is trying to come back together? Is it a place that is trying to move further apart through war or whatever? So looking through the table of contents quickly, I mean, it happened to be the first thing, but to me, I would look to the Borderlands and see what one could possibly roll up there. All right, got the dice tray. We're going to do some rolling here on the minor events in the Borderlands, and we rolled a 38. The party returns to the campsite set up earlier to find something has made off with some of their provisions. So right here we have, I mean, it's, fairly generic. There's a party, there's a campsite, they're traveling. Somebody has made off with some of their provisions, but it is, to me, a place to start an entire session with. This gives the potential for many different directions that one could go from there. It's a much more fruitful way to start for me than to sit down with a rule set and say, I'm going to play, an elf cleric and roll that up. I'm kind of stuck. Here, party returns to the campsite set up earlier to find something has made off with some of their provisions. That is potentially narrative. Now, in my mind, right now, this is also a minor event. In my mind, this, if I was using this work to set up a session, and I may in a future video have a session based on this, I don't know, it's just occurring to me now I could do that. This might not even be part of what I'm doing. This may be all part of a memory of a character, a story that is told at the beginning of the session, something that's written into the history books, something that's discovered written on a scroll, what we're doing right now. This may be temporally way in the past. That's a possibility as well. But that's our minor event. That's what we've got. And now we're going to see a little bit, here it says, I guess I could mention that at the beginning of the tables, I don't know if it's all tables or most tables. Yeah, look, maybe all. Little summary here: the wilderness through which the PCs travel should not be devoid of interesting minor features. Use this table to generate such features as desired, possibly using them to add detail to a party's campsite or break up an otherwise uninteresting day's travel. All right, so we rolled a 71, which will lead us to this huge conical pit. Looks like it was formed by some sort of explosion. Okay, so this might tell us something about obviously the land that we're traveling in. We don't really know anything about the land details, and we can note that down. Is it giving us much right now? No, but it potentially will, and we're going to see what we can get. I was coming back to the table of contents to see if there was anything that I could roll on that would be like a rumor or something like that. And we have under sea voyages omens. I'm kind of interested in that. Obviously, we're not doing anything with the sea, but I do see here there's a campsite minor event, and we had a campsite mentioned here. So I'm going to roll on the campsite minor event and see how that might connect, because I'd like something that's going to suggest a little bit more of something not so strictly environmental. 25, we have a scrap of parchment covered in weathered and illegible writing blows through the camp. Okay, and let's see. Well, we could go to the campsite features. I'm not sure it's the same campsite, but let's see what we get there. 16. A small steep bank stream runs through the campsite. Okay. And we've got the stream. So let's say we're on a borderland here, as we know. So let's say we're suggesting that we're near a coast. That's a borderland between the land and the sea. So let's see what we've got there. We've got the minor events table for the coast. That was a 30. A fishing rod, ensorcelled to be animated, repetitively casts itself into the ocean. A staggering pile of fish bones lies beside the rod. So there's some magical item, abandoned magical item perhaps, or perhaps like a cursed magical item that is a minor event that's happening on the coast. And we will note that, and then let's see. What is this coast like? $72. An empty turtle shell carved with fish symbols has been abandoned here and contains fresh tropical fruits and coconuts. The fruits are yet fresh. I guess the fruits are still fresh. That would suggest perhaps that it had not been here that long. Perhaps it has been left by the person who lost their magic rod. I don't know. I'm going to make a note of this. Let's take a quick look at what I have made of all of this before we move on into the dungeon dressing portion. The Borderlands is this transition between land and sea, and we started out looking at a campsite where clearly something had happened, that some provisions were taken. There was some indication that somebody had been there while our party was gone, and there was a scrap of parchment with some illegible writing that was blowing through the camp. We then decided that the stream that we rolled on that runs through the campsite was going to be more or less a central feature, in the sense that it was going to suggest that the borderland that we were actually in is one between land and sea. And partially that is because this concept of the wind, that there's perhaps a sea breeze blowing this writing, this parchment around. We also did get this huge conical pit formed by some kind of explosion. Didn't really develop that, and that's just kind of hanging out there as something we rolled on. Maybe it will tie in, maybe it won't. When we got down to the sea, we found that there was this ensorcelled fishing rod, this animated rod that was like continually casting itself into the ocean, and next to it was this large pile of fish bones. Now, this could suggest either that this has been going on for time immemorial almost, or it could suggest perhaps that somebody's actually doing this fishing, and when the fish come up, they're eating the fish and they're disposing of the bones in a neat pile. Down the coast, in my mind at any rate, the detail that we rolled up was this empty turtle shell with some fish symbols on it, some writing, and some fresh fruit by it, and the indication that this fruit is definitely still fresh. So clearly somebody is around collecting this fruit, perhaps from the land, perhaps from along the coast, and for whatever reason has left it there. And that is kind of the setting. To me, this is already giving a feel for something, a feel for the place, that there is activity there. There is maybe the people who came up to or it might not be people, of course, but whoever the beings that came up to the campsite to take our provisions. This is, maybe they were the ones that were fishing along the coast, or maybe they are somehow caught up in someone else's magical spell, that they are trapped in some way, or perhaps they are magical students who are, perhaps they're students of an academy nearby that are practicing on how to do their magic. I like this idea that they're practicing how to do magic, and they've got this animated fishing rod. Maybe it's a spell they don't know how to stop. Maybe it's a spell that amuses them. So they're sitting by the side of the coast, eating some fruit, kind of watching the outcome of their spell casting, and maybe they were tired of just having the fruit and the fish, so they smelled the burning embers of our campfire and decided to come up the coast and see what we had that might be better, that would satisfy their culinary desires better. And maybe a wind was blowing, and out of the robes of one of these academy students blew a scrap of parchment that perhaps had the spell written down, because they're students and they're just learning how to cast spells, so they actually have it written down. I'm liking this right here. So this is where my imagination is taking me here with this. That we're near a students' academy. We're near a magical academy, and the students they're on their break, and they're wandering by the beautiful sea, the beautiful coast, and sort of trying to show off for each other maybe what they had learned. And we are just innocent bystanders to the fact that they came up and took a few things. It was indicated as a minor event, so they came up and took a few things from our campsite. This is where I've landed now, and I am going to leave the wilderness here, and we're going to move to the dungeon dressing portion of this video. And in fact, now that I've just developed with you as I'm talking and thinking about it, this concept, it's probably going to inform, when we look at that lengthy table of contents, it's probably going to inform where I initially go to start the rolling. In order to use this with the story that I'm developing, I'm imagining that this party is going to be perhaps walking along the coast and finding and encountering this magical academy. So I'm looking in this book, which offers a huge range of random tables. I notice one here that has to do with, let's see, this illumination magical lights. So I'm imagining that the party is walking up. Perhaps it's nighttime, perhaps it's evening, perhaps everybody on the coast was having a dinner, and that's what was going on there. And we are going to be approaching this magical academy, and it's going to be illuminated in some way, and there's a magical option, so we will take that. There's a whole lantern section here too, but we're going to go with the magical lights and see what type of illumination it is. 27. 27 is an ornate silver chandelier, spins merrily, crystals generating rainbows that flit about the room. Well, in this case, it's the outside of the academy, and this kind of fits with something that I was thinking of. I'm getting a sort of more a lighthearted feel of things, that these mischievous students were kind of wandering about out of this magical academy, and it's an academy that has a sort of spinning lights of rainbow. That makes sense. So I'm already getting a feel and a tone of the adventure I would be doing, and that is perhaps one that is a little more lighthearted. And I will say that I fall into a trap of a kind of a common feel or tone of things, which is like almost semi-serious and dire. Not always, definitely not always. The one that stands out to me is a video I did on Warhammer Quest, where the party like kept falling into a pit, and it just became hilarious, like everybody trying to help the guy get out of what he fell into, and they fell in, and almost it was dictated by the circumstance that it became a little bit more lighthearted. But one of the things that I have to be mindful of is just not kind of bringing the same tone, even just subconsciously, to everything. So here, this is telling me, along with what we developed in the first section when we were looking out at the wilderness, this is telling me that whatever tone would be coming from this story is going to be a little bit more fanciful, magical in the sense of like lighthearted magic, and magical fancy more than anything else, and these mischievous students trying to figure out how to use that spell. So that's what we got with the lights as we approach this academy. And I'm noticing here there is a table, evidence of previous explorers. I'm going to roll on that because, again, well, here's a picture actually. Didn't even really notice this until now. This is kind of what I'm imagining right now, that this party is walking along the coast and approaching this magical academy that they see. And let's see what we get in terms of, this is a miscellaneous feature, evidence of people being here before us, and what that actually looks like. A 93. So a bent crowbar lies discarded in a doorway with a partially opened stone door. All right, so it's inviting. We know that it's a stone door. Maybe we'll look and see something else. Door characteristics and appearance. Well, let's do a little more. Door characteristics and appearance 58. We're going to be walking in here, and it's a stone, so that's nothing perhaps that earth-shattering. There is discussion here in this section and in other sections of kind of general characteristics or features of something. We talk about here different types of construction. We know this is a stone door, but it's been opened by a crowbar, so that's a little bit helpful to us. Let's just see, I don't know, let's see if we get what else we get here about the condition or the appearance or something like that. 38. Narrow double door opens like a pair of shutters and is as wide as a normal single door. Okay, not much there. Let's go to the dressings and features. It's open. We can sort of go through. Maybe we're sneaking in just as they snuck out. Maybe that's it. That it's not fully open, but it's partially open. And what else about it? 58. A chair sits next to the door. Oh, a slumped skeleton, sword in lap, as if on watch, sits in it. Well, this magical guard of the skeleton probably hasn't really been doing too much since he let the students escape. But that is already giving us somebody who's maybe an NPC or that we could interact with in some way, not necessarily feeling very threatened by that. So wouldn't necessarily lead me to combat. If I was stopping here, what this would lead me to would be figuring out how I could communicate with that skeleton maybe and find out, I don't know, where the students are or what this whole academy is about. Something of that nature, but it doesn't, this kind of slump nature of the skeleton. Maybe he fell asleep. Again, taking the suggestion from the tone of where the feeling of this adventure, this somewhat lighthearted feeling, would tell me that rather than rising up out of his slumber or just rising up and animating with the sword in his hand, if we disturbed him, he would kind of be sleepy and maybe even embarrassed that he let the students go. And I'm just noticing here, there's actually a whole table on the double door. So I think we're going to roll on this and just see maybe a little more about this double door. We rolled a 9. Cobwebs cover the door. Small spiders scuttle about within. So this is telling me with the cobwebs, we got the sleeping or slumped skeleton. We got the crowbar pried open. The door is slightly ajar. I think we're at a side entrance here. I don't think we're at the front of this academy. We're at the side entrance, of course, because the students that snuck out, they're not going to be sneaking right out the front. They're going to be sneaking out the side. And maybe, this guard here is the one who gets to guard the side entrance because he's prone to falling asleep or something. So that's how I would continue on with this, and I would just go with that. This is enough story for me already to imagine that my party is sneaking in here. Maybe they want to look around. Maybe they're looking for maybe they want to buy some magic on the side or something. I don't know. Maybe they want to track down the students who are obviously a little bit mischievous and see if those students will, give them a little something. Who knows? So that's where I would leave it. And we could further, there's a table here, dungeon entrances, characteristics, and appearance as we approach. I'm going to roll on this and see what we get. I mean, I have been able, out of what I already have, to kind of develop a little something. I'm not sure I would actually be rolling on that, but for the purpose of the video, let's see what 29 shows us. The entrance is a broad hole located on the side of a steep cliff. Well, I think we had a cliff somewhere else. A rickety wooden rope elevator, sized for 6 man-sized creatures, has been rigged to provide access. It may or may not be safe, or it even could be sabotaged. So continuing on, if we didn't want to deal with the skeleton, if we were sneaking by the skeleton who's sleeping, we could get ourselves to this elevator and decide to possibly descend further into the dungeon. And again, I have a story. I have a couple of different directions I could take it right now. We could try to deal with a skeleton. We could try to descend further. But you know what I don't have? I don't even have a rule set. I don't even have a character. Yet I have a story. And that ultimately is the key to really getting going in solo or really any type of RPG experience. You have to have some kind of a story. You have to be wondering what's going to happen next. Are we going to go down in this elevator? And then what? Is the skeleton going to wake up? And then what? Who is the skeleton? Are the students going to come back? What's going to happen next? And you can really get to that place just with some excellent resources for generating some random events, not even so many events, but random just things in the world, environments, and piecing it together with your own imagination. And this resource and the one on the wilderness are really terrific to do that. And I hope that this video has demonstrated how taking the time to develop something like this, even before you roll anything for a stat, even before you decide what type of character you're going to play, or maybe even what type of rule set you're going to use, can put you in a place and set you up to have a lot of different choices that kind of make sense and to leave you really wondering what's going to happen next.